Indiana, we are simply passing through history. This is history.
Welcome to the Young Indy Chroniclers, a podcast about the making of the show, The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, which first aired on ABC in 1992.
Kept thinking about what was Indiana Jones like as a young man. I came up with this idea of him seeing the world through the eyes of a soldier and a secret agent.
Over the course of our podcast, we're going to talk to a whole host of very talented people who either worked on this show or were there from the beginning.
We were able to shoot it on location in the real places where these events took place.
Oh, make it up as you go. Oh boy, that's great advice.
We hired some of the best European directors, a whole host of very, very talented people.
I'm your host, Peter Holmstrom.
And I'm Daniel Noah, and this is the Young Indy Chroniclers.
There's only one rule, Indiana. Stay alive.
Welcome back to the Young Indy Chroniclers, the one and only podcast devoted specifically and solely to the Young Indiana Jones television series and franchise. I'm your host, Peter Holmstrom, and joining me on this adventure of a lifetime is Mr. Daniel Noah.
Moving right along, Peter.
Moving right along, indeed. On today's show, we're starting a new format for episodes, hopefully one format that will be continuing on with the series, where we take a deep dive look into a specific episode of the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. This week, we are taking a look at the Greece episode that was connected to Travels with Father. And joining us here to talk about this deep dive is Mr. Lucas Seastrom, who currently works at Lucasfilm, although he is not here today as a representative of Lucasfilm, just as a fan. Lucas, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, Peter. Hey, Daniel. And hello, everybody out there listening. It's a real honor and pleasure to be with you all to talk about this wonderful, wonderful program. As Henry Jones Sr. would say, I hope we can have a Spartan weekend.
You know, I just got to appreciate the Skywalker. Is it Skywalker sound or so? You have a little on your flannel there. It's very George Lucas here. I'd love to hear first, though, is a bit about yourself. Like, tell us who you are, how you got to be where you are, and how you first found Young Indiana Jones.
Sure. Why don't I start with the Young Indy part? I mean, like a lot of you listening and you guys yourselves, I'm just a lifelong fan like everybody else, growing up loving these stories, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Lucas, Spielberg, the whole thing. And like a lot of Young Indy fans, I probably came to it in my own unique path, through different exposures. So, growing up watching the VHS copies of the feature films, I had seen the trailer for the show at the front of the VHS, and so I was kind of aware when I was 6, 7, 8 years old. But then I finally was introduced to the program itself in high school. I was a freshman in high school. This movie was coming out called Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Legend says that a crystal skull was stolen from a mythical lost city in the Amazon. Supposedly built out of solid gold, guarded by the living dead.
It was great timing for me, and a wonderful moment to be an indie fan, have Indian stores and restaurants and all kinds of things. And this TV show was syndicated on the History Channel, and I finally got to watch it. And then it was out on DVD, and then I got to pick it up and watch it all the time. And I was always a history buff, and in school, my grandmother was a historian and a professor and things, so I just always loved that kind of stuff. So it just piqued my interest, and it was kind of a slow burn. I discovered the show more and more throughout high school and college, watching the episodes, watching the documentaries especially, and really enjoying the show on two main levels of the substance of the material, the history, the literature, the poetry, the music, the art, all of that. And then what I've always thought of as the biographical aspect of the show and how it informs your view of Indiana Jones's life and story and his character arc. And it does so much to enhance the way you experience the movies with Harrison Ford. So anyway, it was something I love, and half my library is because of Young Indiana Jones, from Krishnamurti to Tolstoy to Robert Graves to you name it. But I went to film school and stuff, always loved the movies. I never thought that, working at a place like Lucasfilm was going to be in the cards, but I just got really lucky I started to work in the community and got to meet people at Lucasfilm, and I started there about 8.5 years ago in the publicity and communications department as a writer and historian. And my job is kind of two halves, really, where I just write a lot of articles, do a lot of copy editing, and then I work on exhibits and programs and events and panels, and get to interact with fans, and I get to work with our archivists at the company. I'm not an archivist. I'm not a white glove, highly trained person. I'm just a storyteller or somebody who interprets all that amazing stuff that the amazing archivists handle. But anyway, working at Lucasfilm was a special way for all these passions to kind of come together. And it's a whole new layer of Young Indy love working at Lucasfilm, because I've gotten to learn so much more about the show and meet people who worked on it and were involved in it. So.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, but you are responsible for a lot of the the official kind of interviews with Jonathan Hales and a few other people that have come out on the Lucasfilm website in recent years. Is that right?
Yes, everything's a team effort that we do. On Lucasfilm.com especially, we like to kind of speak with one voice of the company. But yes, I was lucky enough to be the guy to talk with Mr. Hales, to talk with Mr. Flannery, and for those public-facing interviews, which were really exciting to do. Jonathan Hales is full of insights. He's a history guy, and I believe you guys will be talking to him at some point this season as well, which will be great. I can't wait to hear that. I'm sure he'll tell all kinds of other amazing stories. And Sean Patrick Flannery, I've interviewed a lot of people, and I think it's safe to say that nobody has a memory quite like Sean Patrick Flannery. The guy has a recall that just blew me away, all the way down to his dialogue in other languages. He was doing the German from when he's Fritz Diefenbacher and all that stuff to me over Zoom, and I was just sitting there, reliving. I was in the show for 5 seconds when he was, saying those lines to me. It was really, really special.
Ich heiße Fritz Diefenbacher. Ich bin ein Geschäftsmann.
So
that's awesome, and it's so special too that you're coming at it from being a fan of the show.
Oh, mate, what do you know of Aristotle?
He's dead.
He's dead?
The show we're doing today is where we're going to be talking about specifically the Greece episode of Travels with Father, and uncovering all sorts of tidbits that we have for that show in particular. Lucas, first question though for you. Do you recall when you would have seen this episode for the first time? I guess it probably would have been on that History Channel syndication run, maybe, or maybe the DVD release.
I think I got to this one on the DVD. I only saw 3 or 4 on History Channel I remember seeing Spring Break Adventure particularly, and I think Passion for Life. But I remember discovering this one actually in both the Tolstoy and the Greece elements made a huge influence on me. We're not here to talk about Russia, but it was one of those great moments that I know all of the fans of the show have, that makes it so special and unique. Was, I remember watching the episode, going down to visit my grandparents and seeing War and Peace on my grandfather's shelf, and all of a sudden my curiosity was piqued because I had experienced this story, and I grabbed the book off the shelf, and that's the magic of this program.
That's Tolstoy.
Yes, sir. He wrote some books once, but don't mention it to him because he gets very annoyed. I guess they weren't very good.
And Travels with Father in particular. So it was the same thing with the philosophers, and it definitely kicked off a big curiosity to want to learn more about syllogisms and things. So.
Why don't we set the context for the audience? So this episode, like all these episodes, is edited into a film called, in this case, Travels with Father, which has a bit of a unique history in that it was the last television film, and therefore the last episode of the series, to air on television. It aired on the Family Channel in 1996 with that title, Travels with Father. But of course, as we've actually learned through some of these interviews, all of these were shot as hour-long installments, even the ones that did air as TV movies. And this one was shot in 1994, almost 2 years before it aired, and was directed by Deepa. I don't know how to pronounce this, so forgive me if I get this wrong, but as I could say it, Deepa Mehta, who is I believe, an Indian Canadian director who also did the Benares episode, which is another great episode that I enjoy. And then it was re-edited twice because the first time it aired, of course, as a TV movie, it had bookends that featured Sean Patrick Flannery and Lloyd Owen playing their sort of older counterparts. And if you saw it in 96, that's the version you saw, and the only time that version has ever been seen.
We're never together. We never have been.
And then when the DVD was released, because of course it was not released on VHS, we have a new version where connector footage, as we've learned it's called, most likely written by Jonathan Hales, joins these two episodes, the Tolstoy episode and the Grease episode. And the Flannery scenes are now parts of another film called Winds of Change. So if all of that is just sends you in a spinning circle, the episode that is set in Greece is really about, young Indy getting to spend what seems like some rare quality time with his father.
The initial broadcast version, the bookends that we have, really is also a bookend for Indy's relationship with his father. This being one of the last episodes that, at the time, they probably knew this was going to be the last one, and so they're really giving you both the end for their relationship, and then you're also seeing the very beginning, which is much more of it ends on such a positive note, and it makes that emotional punch of seeing that Indy say goodbye there at the very end of the episode just hit so much harder, because you're like, God, you guys were just so close to having a good relationship at one time, and then it just sort of slips away from you.
Father, I'm sorry we haven't talked more.
So am I, Henry. I know it's what your mother would have liked. And I know, too, that she'd have wanted me to say, I'm glad you're safe. You're going somewhere.
University of Chicago.
Chicago?
To study archaeology.
What about Princeton?
The archaeology department's better at Chicago. You said I could decide. You wrote me.
That was a long time ago.
Father...
Very well. If that's what you want.
Dad...
Close the door behind you when you leave, Junior.
The question kind of remains of was there what the original introductory elements for Grease were, because all we have now today is the DVD version. But the bookends that we do have out there are very much what we see in the Princeton episode 1919, I believe, 1919, where Indy is coming home from Europe for the very first time. He runs into what's her name, Daniel? Is it Alicia Witt? Is that who I'm thinking?
Oh, the
of
actress? No, you're thinking of Robin Lively.
I think I'm Robin Lively.
Yeah.
I keep mixing these two up. It's terrible. Redheads in Hollywood. There's just so many. It's Robin Lively, and then he goes in to meet his father, and his father is very cold to him. Is just like barely even registers his presence. Indy starts reminiscing about the time in Athens where they actually were close.
Except maybe that time in Athens, but that...
In Athens?
Professor Jones starts talking about how, that was right after that time in Russia where you ran away.
We'd gone to Greece, if I remember, straight after our visit to Russia.
And that leads us into the Russia episode, and then just kind of naturally transitions into the Greece one with Athens.
We went to see the monasteries, just the two of us.
It's a really interesting introduction, and then the show itself ends with...
For a while there, just for that moment. You really were my dad.
I want to ask Lucas a question, but first I just want to point out, at least in the DVD version, this is one of the few instances we get in the series where the famous Indiana Jones map sequence is depicted. We get to see a long journey from Russia to Greece, and a boat and train and all sorts of things, and some great footage cut in of all the locations they're going to, and that's very special. But I wanted to ask you, Lucas, what is it about this episode? And you've mentioned your library, but what is it that draws you to this episode specifically?
Oh, well, where to begin? It's that, if I had to, boil it down, it's that dialectic between art and reason, that wonderful blend of poetry and entertainment that this show can have, of sublimity and fun. It's a really great emblematic example. I've multiple times when I've introduced people to this show, I show them Grease. I go straight to Grease because it's a great sampler. So it's that gentleness and serenity and soulfulness that I think has a lot to do with Deepa Mehta and her work. She'd already done Benares before this, although they're in the story chronology. Grease comes just before it, but she has a kind of soulfulness that is very George Lucas-y, very mythical, very archetypal, but also she's very good at directing with kids. A lot of her other movies are like Water, which was nominated for Best Foreign Film in 2005 or 6 at the Oscars. So it's just this great blend of materials. That's kind of the top line reason I'd give.
Being an immigrant to Canada, and I became a citizen much later, means displacement. You have an idea of what you have left behind, and yet you're in a place that you really don't know. So there's a subjectivity and an objectivity at the same time, or the country that you have left behind and the country that you have adopted. And that vision actually is what informs most of my work.
Well, I know we discussed this with Matthew Jacobs. I remember he was quite moved, and I was quite moved, frankly, when we discussed the Kazantzakis. And we don't have to jump ahead in the episode, but the Kazantzakis interaction and some of the back and forth. And, it's funny because I got the DVDs when they came out in 2007. I was already a fan of the show. Of course, never seen this episode. And I remember I was living in a basement at the time, not my mother's, but someone else's. It was an unfinished basement, and it was large, but I sort of had a little corner, and I had basically a bed and a table and a computer. And so I was watching these in this basement on this computer, and I remember getting to that scene, and he's talking about the prime mover and the unknown cause, and I remember being so moved as I'm sitting in this, darkness, basically. And it's an experience that's really stuck with me after all these years.
That's awesome. But let's hold off, and we'll get to Kazantzakis later on, because we got a lot to talk about there, I'm sure. But it's but first, let's kind of go through this episode here. The episode starts when we're introduced, and Miss Seymour is sickly, therefore setting up the notion that Henry Jones is going to have to take care of the young Indy, played by Corey Carrier himself.
And behave while you're with your father.
No, me with father.
Yes. I'll see you both on Monday.
Well,
But, Mother, I thought I was going with you.
you are, Junior.
Yes, I am.
No.
No. So who's looking after him?
Why, you are, my dear. Helen must get over her migraine, and they don't allow children at the spa. I am sure you'll both manage.
Anna is Indy's mom. Anna's actually already had a trip planned to go visit her sister, which is a character that we've never actually seen in the show, but that would be Indy's aunt. Henry Jones is stuck with taking care of Corey Carrier's young Indy, and neither one of them really want to do it, which I think is a very fun aspect. They're both equally like, this is a terrible idea. They are just at complete opposite ends of the spectrum here. But Henry Jones has already made plans to go to a Hanin monastery. And
I think it's the same monastery from For Your Eyes Only, right?
Is it really? Oh, no.
Lucas
Don't
is
do
nodding.
that to me, Daniel.
He's nodding.
He's nodding. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's well, we'll get to it, but it's Meteora and Thessaly, and it's specifically, there are 5 or 6 of them, but one of them is the one from the Bond entry.
St. Cyril's, where we used to hide from the Germans. Only Christatus would make an abandoned monastery's personal retreat.
James is counting on surprise.
But we are only 5 men.
And 1 woman.
Your best approach will be on the right face, which is away from the buildings. Then you'll have to make towards the shed on the left, which houses the basket and the electronic winch.
It's an interesting note, especially looking at Anna's character here and kind of the character of Indy's mom. We never actually see Anna die, and Anna obviously at some point dies, and that creates, I think we can say, like, Lucas, jump in if you have a different idea, but like I think that is the big rift that would happen between Indy and his father.
I'd go so far as to say that Anna is the glue that holds the family together, and this episode is a great example of that the only time that the two characters, Indy and Senior, or we'll say Indy and Henry, I guess, come together is when Anna forces them to. It's the only way that is even a potentiality.
No, Anna, this is impossible.
It is impossible.
I have been looking forward to this for the entire journey. I am not staying here.
But I'm going to Kalabaka.
Well, you just have to take Henry with you.
Well, the hanging monasteries are no place for children.
Well, why not?
They're dangerous.
How dangerous?
A monastery dangerous? Really, Henry?
She's the only one that Henry Sr. will be vulnerable with. And the person, as Indy says in the first episode,
She was the sweetest, smartest, most wonderful woman who ever lived.
So she's the fulcrum.
No, and I think there's an interview clip that, if I can find it, I'll put in here, where George talks about his own mother and how she was, sickly when he was younger.
My father was very firm, and he was very, my mother was actually ill a lot, so I was raised a lot by my father. He had rules, but in the end he was being a reasonably conservative guy and pretty firm. He was very, very fair.
Feels like that's very much an inspiration.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can definitely give a lot of analogies to George and his own upbringing when it comes to Indy and his father.
Father, I don't think that he understands your ancient Greek.
Well, he should have understood it.
The first stop is at the birthplace of philosophy, and they have a really fun scene in there that I've always kind of described as almost like a musical number, where Henry is talking to Indy about like the birth of philosophy and Aristotle and all these things.
Junior, this was not a barbaric slaughterhouse. We are standing in a theatre, a temple of great poetry, drama, and philosophy. Remember, Athens is the very birthplace of philosophy.
Lucas, what can you talk to us a bit about that, and how important that scene is for you?
Well, it's a great scene. It's kind of, where to begin. It's a real theater. It's a real kind of a real amphitheater on the slope of the Acropolis in Athens. It's the Odeon of Herodes Atticus, if I said that right. It's actually a Roman theater, though, so it isn't quite where Aristotle was hanging out, but, good enough, but they were considering some other amphitheaters elsewhere in Greece, but I just don't think it made logistical sense for the production. They needed to stay around Athens as much as they could.
We're standing in the birthplace of philosophy.
It's the first lesson, and it's the first time that Indy has really been taught by his father, certainly that we've seen in the show, and we could infer that, he's at school, then he gets Miss Seymour as his tutor, and Miss Seymour's sick, Anna's gone, and so now he's got the professor. Now he's advanced all the way to postgraduate level at the age of 9 or 10.
Tiller, the professor, he was never giddy, even when he was a schoolboy. He's a teacher of medieval literature, the one the students hope they don't get.
I love the fact that Senior begins with the syllogism.
What's a syllogism?
Well, first off, as a medieval scholar, he's going to go right to logic.
All men are mortal.
All men are mortal.
Socrates is a man, ergo Socrates is mortal. Now that is a syllogism.
People in the Middle Ages were obsessed with logic, and particularly with Aristotle, so Senior's going to be an Aristotle guy as well.
Our ability to understand the great philosophical question is measured by our ability to be logical. Now, being logical doesn't mean being cold and remote. It primarily means we follow a system of reasoning that draws specific truth from a general truth.
But it's a great entry point because he establishes an example of a logical formula that how we can apply reason and rationality to begin to understand things in our world. And then the rest of the story is very quickly about how that doesn't work almost all the time. And what do we do about that as critical thinkers? But just as a fan, what's great about it is it's just Lloyd Owen putting on a show. He's just a par excellence performance. As you said, it's his own one-man musical, and Corey Carrier's wonderful as well, just making light of everything he's doing. But it's great costume design. I don't know if they planned for his suit and his coat and everything to match the floor of the theater. Even his eye color matches. It's just such a beautifully composed scene.
It is, and I noted on my last rewatch that Henry Sr. does a kind of a play sword fight thing, and which is mirroring something that Young Indy, Corey Carrier, did just a few scenes before, and Jones Sr. was chastising him for it. And I thought that was very funny.
Junior, this was not a barbaric slaughterhouse. We are standing in a theater.
From there, we really kind of get into a bit more of the you could almost look at this episode as structured more like a comedy in some ways. Like, it is very light, but you get into the hijinks of it as the episode really goes on. I mean, I suppose you could say the first one is that, like, the two people who don't want to be paired together are paired together. But the next big hiccups in the road really come when they get into the wrong cab.
Our cab had a driver.
This cab had a driver?
Ergo, this is...
And then sheep come along and steal all their clothing, and so then they're having to, like, traverse Greece naked.
We got delayed. It's a long story.
It's almost a little bit of a shame that this episode didn't go harder into the comedy aspects.
One thing I can say is that they definitely tried earlier. And there was more there add-ons to scenes and things that they were attempting to flesh it out a little bit more in that, but they had to tighten it down in part, I think, because it was written originally as Athens 1908, as a 45-minute standard episode, but maybe it had to get condensed ever so slightly to allow for the bridges in the 2-hour TV movie version.
Do you have any insight into the writing process of this episode or anything like that?
Yes, I can say some general things, about the process of it. Matthew Jacobs did the first pass on this. It was written, as I said, as Athens 1908 as a standard 1 hour, and that was a second season draft. That was it was turned in early 1992 to be considered for the second season. For whatever reason, it didn't go into production right away. That's a lot. There's more question marks than answers that I have in my pocket. But the next kind of pass was the formal Travels with Father pass that I've seen anyway, from early '94, and that's the Franken script with 3 names on it: Matthew Jacobs, Frank Darabont, and Jonathan Hales. One of the really interesting things, though, is that one of the earlier versions of Travels with Father was quite long. It was actually maybe a TV movie with an intermission in it, because it actually combined the Princeton 1919 story with Russia and Greece. So the Robert Goddard, Paul Robeson stuff was built around what you see in the broadcast version of the show, which is Indy coming home, sitting at the table, and bringing up that memory. So it was condensed way down.
But say, how about we get together next week sometime?
That's great. Yeah, we'll make a night of it. We'll get something to eat.
Oh, you know a place in Princeton where a white boy and a black boy can grab a beer and get something to eat?
Trust me.
That's my trouble, Jonesy. I always did.
Princeton 1919 never aired. I don't think it was a VHS release. I don't think anybody saw it until the DVDs.
I always wondered that about the Goddard stuff, because I was kind of like, well, okay, if this was bookends in Travels with Father, like, when did they shoot this? When did they come up with this? What does this have to do with anything? So it's interesting that was actually a part of the Travels with Father, maybe even shot, before they pared it down or in addition to it. That's really interesting.
From what I can deduce, it was shot almost in sequence. They did Russia and Prague in Czechoslovakia, or Czech Republic, and then they shot Greece, and then they came back to the United States and shot at Wilmington at Carolco Studios, which was known as at the time, for all of the Princeton stuff.
That would actually fit like really well, because we watched the DVD cut, and you can see there's moments where they come back later, because you can see Lloyd Owen's fake beard, his prosthetic beard. It looks very different in a few shots, but it's not as much as you would think if they had filmed just the 3.5 minutes of the bookends that we have in the Travels with Father broadcast version of the episode. So that makes sense that they would have just shot that right then.
Well, what's funny is I think Owen physically, because obviously he wears makeup and he ages with prosthetics, but physically I think he's at his oldest in the Tangiers episode.
Slavery was accepted through most ancient civilizations. Not having slaves is a relatively new idea.
Which is probably the last episode he would have shot, which would have been after all this, right? Because I think, as far as we can tell, maybe Lucas, you would know, but from the records we've been able to access, it seems like they shot that episode in 1996 in Morocco. He's pulling out a book.
Oh boy.
Oh, I think that's the same book.
Is that your
What
book?
book is
That's
that?
your book, Daniel. Yeah.
Probably the same one you have. You'd be surprised. We rely on a lot of the same stuff that everybody else relies.
That's so funny. No, Cinema of George. Is that Cinema of George Lucas? Yes, it is. So good. I have that record. Yep.
I got it too.
So yeah, and actually, it's what I think we didn't know, and I think might be missing from that book. I'm not sure that it denotes the Princeton filming in '94. So that would be that missing piece. It does show the Prague and the Greece filming that you just mentioned. I mean, even with Robin Lively, like, again, it can't be that many years later because she doesn't look that different, and all that has to happen in this period of time.
One of my big questions is who directed the Wilmington stuff.
That's our question too, and who directed the all the connectors? Yes. Really? Simon Windsor, an episode that I actually have no idea if we'll have released when you listen to this or not. But, he speculated that his assistant director, I believe, or second unit director may have done some because he saw an additional directing credit on one of the movie edits, which I did see. It's there, but I don't know what it means. And Windsor didn't know what it meant. Maybe we can find this guy, Crispin Reese, I believe, is the director's name. But yeah, it's one of those big questions of who shot all this stuff.
Lots of questions.
I like to think it was George. That's just what I like. He took some time off from directing, The Phantom Menace, and just directed some Young Indy. It was great. So back to the episode here, but their next big conversation point is to go over like the various political systems that are out there, and kind of the donkey cart as they're going along with the cabbie whose name is Aristotle and the donkey's name Plato.
So my wife said, Aristotle, she said, if you don't call that donkey Plato, you're gonna have no one to talk to.
It's a really interesting way of conveying these like political systems that in many ways were first being discussed and popularized in ancient Greece.
So tell me, do you believe in democracy? Democracy, hypocrisy. It never existed and never will. And anyone who believes it is a bigger fool than Plato. Interesting. So Plato was a fool.
No, Plato's the donkey.
If we ever need a secret Young Indy password, everybody, listening, I could go to a hideout or something. It's Plato's the donkey.
We talked about this briefly earlier, but let's really dig into this here. The hanging monasteries. We get there. I was not really aware these were even things, but apparently I'm the idiot, I guess.
Idiot comes from a Greek word, which means one who is not interested in politics.
Lucas, what can you tell us about these hanging monasteries that are there in Greece?
It's a place called Meteora, which I think I'm saying it right, or Meteora, which is a Greek term that means something like high in the air. One thing I'm going to say, I'm a Lucasfilm historian. Got to qualify myself. I'm not a professional philosopher. I'm not a Greek historian or anything. I just go to the library on the weekends because it's fun and it's full of books. So I was doing this in anticipation of this wonderful conversation. And so libraries are magical places, as the episode itself shows. But it's Thessaly, so it's north central Greece. It's in the foothills of the mountains where Mount Olympus is, the actual, Olympos, the actual Mount Olympus, about 200 odd miles north of Athens, where actually, as we record this, very sadly, there are very serious wildfires going on in that part of Greece right now, and hope everyone is safe. But it's all kinds of interesting things. People were there in the ancient times. Herodotus wrote about it, the first historian, as they call him. Julius Caesar fought a battle there. But then, what's about the monasteries? Well, these huge pinnacles of sandstone and conglomerate rock is just about a square mile. They're 60 million years old. It's an old seabed. There are about 24 of these huge towers of rock that there are notations of going back to the ancient times. And there are caves and things. So beginning in the 9th century, as far as we know, hermits and ascetics and anchorites would go up and live in these caves. And then in the mid 14th century, this is the 1300s, Greece is controlled by the Byzantine Empire, a remnant of the Roman Empire. And the Byzantine Empire is falling, and this region of Greece is under contention. There are people from the north, from the east, all fighting over it. And if you're a monk trying to build a place to live in peace in a monastery and practice your faiths, the top of that big tower there looks pretty useful. So these late Byzantine monasteries crept up. There were 24 of them at the most. And by the time Indy and Henry are going there in the early 20th century, there are still closer to a dozen or around 10 that were active monasteries. They're still there today. It's a huge tourist destination in Greece, and there are maybe 4 or 5 of them that still have monks in them. But in the mid-20th century, the tourist trade swelled, and a lot of the monks left town because they couldn't deal with the crowds. But one of the interesting things in context of the show, because of course you always want to know, well, what's the history that informs the show? There were libraries, there still are libraries as far as I know, and they're full of medieval manuscripts. And that has a lot to do with the value of the Meteora monasteries. And through the 19th century, there were people attempting to pilfer, to con the monks out, buying them and things. In the 1880s, when that part of Greece became part of the Greek state, the Greek government tried to take all the manuscripts and bring them to Athens, and the monks, by that point, understood what was going on. They said no. And so if you were a classical or medieval scholar, you had to go to the monasteries to study these manuscripts. And this is the time. So, Debbie Fine, Joe Donaldson, the Lucasfilm researchers, they always knew what they were doing. Everything I'm saying, they just old news. We know all this. But the year, 1910, the date of this episode is a little wishy-washy, but one of the first major inventories of all the manuscripts of Meteora had been published. So it's prime real estate for Henry Sr. to be going up there.
Well, and he was that professor of medieval languages or whatever they say in Last Crusade. So it's really on topic. This is exactly the kind of place this person would go to. And it makes sense that he'd bring his son.
It's a true thing then that they would only be accessible through like whatever the hell that's a cage, whatever the wooden cage thing is.
I read into it as much as I could. And yes, they still use rope pulleys and things. Up until the early 20th century, that was the only way to access most of them. There were either rope ladders that went along the side of the cliff and you climbed up, or they had the pulleys. I haven't found any evidence of a cage. That might have been a fabrication for the ease of narrative storytelling, but it's not a definitive statement by any means. What I did find evidence of were nets, rope nets. So visitors in the 19th century, from Western Europe would come, and the way you would get up there if you didn't want to do the ladder was they'd lay out a net, put a blanket at the bottom, and tie you in. And they pull you up, and the monks would just tell you to pray. And there are some wonderful accounts from the 19th century of these different travelers and getting to the top and going straight to the church. There's a quote from a Russian priest, Porphyrius Uspensky, who went there in 1859 and wrote this account. And he got to the top, and they took him out of the net. He said, where's the chapel? And he went there, and he was in tears, and he got on his knees, and he thanked God, quote, for the salvation of my life, unnaturally committed to the habits of a bird.
Oh my God.
You'll find your faith dangling from the monastery.
I can't imagine they actually were able to film at one of these monasteries. Like they get a few establishing shots or whatever, but a lot of the photography was done elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at it, my guess is that like the location, I'm sure this location that they're in is somewhere else. It's probably not a location somewhere in Greece. That's not a hanging monastery. And then there's a lot of establishing shots. I'm sure there's some stock footage. They maybe even bought the footage from the For Your Eyes Only. I mean, who knows? Like,
see Roger Moore kind of dangling from.
I think I see him in this one shot. There's an old man.
But you're too old for me.
You have done this. Poisoned her against me.
I think you mean a man in his prime.
I adore grateful men.
That's what you're saying.
I won't need you anymore tonight.
But Lucas would probably have more access to production records than I do. Do you have any insights on where they filmed any of this?
Just a little bit, and it's thanks to the fan at the Indie Locations website, because I was actually trying to figure this out too. I don't know the exact URL, but probably throw it in the show notes or something. But There are some establishing shots of the actual Meteora monasteries on the big rocky pinnacles. I don't know if it's stock, or I don't know if they sent a quick unit up there to grab those inserts. But the exterior stuff, when Indy's walking in the courtyard and there's beautiful arches and the little church, and the inside of the church is actually a smaller monastery just east of Athens. Here's a name I'll butcher, apologies, but the Kaiseriani Monastery. It's just east of Athens. It's late, what is it? It's also Byzantine era. It's actually a little older than the Meteora monasteries. And you can go to it today. But the question mark for me is the library interior, the cell where they sleep and stuff. It certainly looks like a European wall. So I'm assuming that it's in Greece because, as you guys know, they crammed it all in those 2 to 3 weeks of shooting. So
good point. I never thought about that, looking at the production dates and being like, were they there for the duration of an episode shoot? If they were, they shot everything. I've never actually applied that logic to this. I'm going to have to do that. The beautiful location, though, looking at it, the stills of it, like, it feels like something you'd see on like a Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon today. Maybe they did go for Game of Thrones at one. But it's incredible that so many of these structures, they're still around, and the only reason we don't see that much of them on TV is the work that people don't want to do the work of like going there, right? They'd rather just build a set somewhere. But it's really beautiful, and just being able to see it and think about the history.
Yeah, and it's interesting too to look at the filming of Young Indy as almost like kind of the last time that you could even film a lot of this. Like the Acropolis, they get footage of that early on. It's like today, it would be such a madhouse to film that. Just have to wrangle thousands of people, and yet, so this is kind of in many ways one of the last times you could.
I only saw the film once, but did they not go to the Acropolis and the Dial of Destiny?
They did not. They went to, if you're thinking of the one I'm thinking of, they went to, don't quote me, it's Roman or Greek site in Sicily.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
I think it's the Segesta Temple, if memory serves, but it's a beautiful temple, real place. One of Harrison Ford's interviews was shot there for the behind the scenes. It's a real ancient site.
I'm bored.
Bored? We're sitting in one of the most fascinating libraries in this part of the world, and you're bored.
So Henry puts them to task to write an essay, because that's what every good parent does to their kid. Specifically about the relationship between nature and causality. Yes, I do have a degree in philosophy. No, I cannot describe it particularly well, but there was a school of thought, especially in ancient Greece, as I recall, that the certain objects, certain things in nature have a purpose. They have an ingrained thing that they are made for, and that is embedded in their essence and in their being. Right? Am I completely remembering this wrong, Lucas, or feel free to jump in?
No, absolutely. Well, I'll defer to the man with the letters after his name in philosophy. Absolutely, but
it's just a BS degree. It's not.
Good one. Yeah, it's Aristotle's four causes, as they call them. There's actually found a really great video with this one professor on YouTube. I was thinking I would send you guys maybe that you can share with the listeners. It's just like a 6-minute video where he explains the four causes. But Kazantzakis takes Indy through them in a lovely sort of soft way without even naming them.
What caused it to fall?
Well, I pushed it.
What else?
Nothing else.
Wrong. There were 4 causes.
And so when if you want, I could go through them. First, there's the material cause, which is the
essence of the fruit, its weight.
Then there's the formal cause, which is
its structure. It is round. It can roll.
And then there's the efficient cause, which is the agency. So that's Indy pushing it.
Third, you pushed it.
And then there's the big one, the final cause, which is, as Kazantzakis says, its
function included seeking the lowest level.
Like gravity.
No, I mean its function.
The case of the orange to grow and make another tree, which for Aristotle was that unmoved mover that came up already. I can do a ramble about that, but I don't know if you wanted to get to the unmoved mover part yet. But,
so let's rock it.
Okay, sure. It's the fourth cause is the key for Aristotle, because you can follow this trail of causality all the way to the celestial formations that are up in the sky. And it's really cool when you study philosophy, because it's this great connection between Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, the founders of formal Western philosophy, and the people who came before them, who were very preoccupied with these metaphysical questions and these observations they were making. They were less preoccupied with how do we live our lives, and more up in the heavens in a way. And what it boils down to is there has to be something that isn't moving, that isn't another agent forming a cause, that isn't another efficient cause. And for Aristotle, that's the final cause, the unmoved mover, which for him is God, is a kind of God. And there's 2,000 years of interpretation about what exactly that means and justifies and proves. But for me, in the interest of Young Indy, that idea of this sort of eternal something there takes me to Passion for Life, and the line that Theodore Roosevelt tells Indy when they're watching the sunset, when he says,
"This is the stillness of the eternal beginning, the world as it has always been."
That's this kind of sublime expression of what that unmoved mover could be if you interpret it. And interestingly, as a footnote, that's a Carl Jung quote that I found out. This another Young Indy character.
So you also agree that power, eros, and love present us with an unsolvable dilemma.
And all three of these lines were written by Matthew Jacobs. Because he wrote Young in Perils of Cupid. He wrote that line with Roosevelt, and he wrote Kazantzakis. So clearly, Jacobs is the one who's sort of really into this subject line.
That's cool. Even another thing I found is that Kazantzakis was good friends with Albert Schweitzer. He dedicated one of his later books to Schweitzer about St. Francis. So all kinds of great Young Indy stuff that isn't even about Young Indy.
Wow, that's great. And then on the other side of the equation too, it's that Kazantzakis is the one who wrote the book, The Last Temptation of Christ, which was then later adapted into a movie by Martin Scorsese, who is very good friends with George Lucas. So there is a potentially, I'm not saying this is true, but a potential direct line of Lucas was tipped off to this cool fella by Scorsese. I'm not sure.
The Last Temptation of Christ, if I'm not mistaken, the film was released in 1989.
88, but yeah.
88. And Lucas actually just confirmed that this script was first written in 1992, which means that it was certainly, my guess is that the figure of Nikos Kazantzakis was on that board, so to speak, or on those cards fairly early. It was not an accident. And you're absolutely right that the awareness of the book and the controversy surrounding the film was probably something very much on Lucas and all these writers' minds. I mean, you're writing only 4 years after the film was released. I feel like it's something you're going to be very aware of.
You will get these periodic attacks on art from various fundraising religious organizations. Ironically, they weren't far from wrong, because it was blasphemous, but it wasn't blasphemous in the way they were thinking. They're thinking blasphemy is just saying something bad about somebody. If you put a clown nose on Jesus, well, that's not blasphemy. That's sacrilege, but not blasphemy. Kazantzakis' original premise is blasphemy, which is it is not God who creates us, but it is we through our striving who create him. And that Jesus, in fact, was creating God. God wasn't creating him. So that's blasphemous. But of course, it's blasphemous in a very interesting and complex way. And it's the kind of blasphemy that gives rise to religion. But nobody quite caught on to it that way.
Maybe this was just George taking a piss at all the protesters again. Just being like, oh, you didn't like this movie? Well, here's the author, too. I'll just force it down your throat.
Well, it's funny, and I don't normally plug other podcasts, but there's a podcast I listen to called The Cinephiles that is a movie sort of analysis commentary podcast, and they did an episode on The Last Temptation of Christ not long ago, and spent quite a lot of time talking about Kazantzakis and his faith, that he was a Greek Orthodox, member of the Greek Orthodox Church, which makes sense given where we find him here in this monastery. And that, he wasn't writing out of to mock or to ridicule, but to work through serious ideas and questions and philosophies that he had. And I think that this film, Travels with Father, depicts him as an intellectual, as an introspective, as a deep thinker, and someone who's yearning for, satisfying answers that satisfy the soul, so to speak. And so I think that is very much in line with someone who wrote a meditation, on the figure of Christ, whatever you may think of that. So it made me, learning that, which I only learned since we've been doing the podcast, as far as him writing the Last Temptation of Christ, really made me appreciate the episode and the actor and the performance and the characterization and all of what was being achieved, sort of attempted here, so much more.
But what causes nature?
Bravo. That is a question that comes from wisdom and not from logic. You have found the question your father hoped you would find.
I did?
Yeah, Kazantzakis is such a fascinating figure. If memory serves, he was excommunicated, right, from the Greek Orthodox Church.
I believe so. I don't know if it was because he wrote the book or prior to that.
I feel like it was a very direct thing, but in a way, I completely agree with you though in that this is a man who was asking questions, and in the book itself and in the subsequent movie, Scorsese is also famously a pretty devout Catholic, but one who views art as a way of not only expressing one's own faith, but also expressing one's own questions regarding faith.
I was never crucified. I never came back from the dead. I'm a man like everybody else.
Quiet.
Why are you telling these lies?
What are you talking about?
I'm the son of Mary and Joseph. I'm the one who preached in Galilee. I had followers. We marched on Jerusalem. Pilate condemned me and God saved me.
No, he didn't.
Who are you talking about? Don't try and tell me what happened to me, because I know.
And to both people, the art of the philosophy of questioning is an incredibly important part of their faith. And it's I just always remember the moment in this episode where the actor who plays Kazantzakis is George Jacques. I'm sure I'm horribly mispronouncing that. I'm so sorry, but it's I presume he's Greek. I'm not sure though, but he a wonderful actor there. But he's talking specifically about. He kind of gets to the end of explaining to Indy about nature and cause, and he ends with that notion of what is God essentially, and he sees this yearning, this questioning, but also in a way this desperation. He is just so incredibly desperate for these answers on a very deep existential level.
You see, God, the unmoved mover, the prime cause. God dances beyond the bounds of logic.
Just kind of that haunted look, I guess is the way to describe it, in his eyes in that moment. Very cool.
Well, and the imagery, Lucas, you highlighted the reality, right, of a monastery in the mountain, the practicality of it, the protection. But there's also this sort of imagery and this essence to that of, we have literally, you mentioned Mount Olympus, right? We have literally built this monastery in the heavens. We've built it in the sky. It's a cloud city.
You look absolutely beautiful. You truly belong here with us among the clouds.
But you have this character, this person, this historical figure, who and I don't know if they know for a fact. I'm sure whether he was here or whether it's just the sort of place he might be, but who has come looking for answers, yes, in books, in manuscripts, but in the heavens, right, figuratively. And he is desperate, and he's come to the ends of the earth and the ends of creation and the ends of the physical world to try to ask these questions. And I think, in a modern context where we can sit at a computer and, we can Google and we can access all of recorded history potentially, we've maybe lost a little of that feeling of that desperation of what it used to cost to search for knowledge.
What is it you seek?
What do you seek? What all men have sought since time began.
The ultimate knowledge.
The travel the world and read a manuscript that only exists in one place, and to interact with that. I think that the performance really communicates that desperation and lets us experience a world. I almost want to call it the ancient world, but it's 100 years old. It's not that ancient. But a less than modern world, right, where we didn't have all these conveniences.
I think if you're going to pick a word for the story, it's ascent, because there's, or ascendance. There's lots of forms of ascendance, and this show has both the literal and figurative of them. You know, what you're talking about with Kazantzakis, and then what Indy and his dad are going to do in the next sequence. But to stay with that for a moment, if I may, yes, there is real history behind this that I was able to uncover. Kazantzakis, I didn't find any examples of him going to Meteora specifically, but my favorite part of this scene is the almond tree poem. And so I followed that down a rabbit hole, and it's from an actual book that Kazantzakis wrote, where he ascribes it to a friend of his. And when he was a young man, he met a contemporary, a Greek poet named Angelos Siklianos, and they were both young, passionate writers who were seekers. And they said, let's go to Mount Athos. And Mount Athos is this very famous peninsula in northeastern Greece, where there's this huge mountain over this kind of like Big Sur, you know, the coast of California, these huge mountains over the sea. And there's this whole string of monasteries around this mountain perched on cliffs above the water. They're still there. They've been cut off their own community for 1,000 years, and you still can't really get in unless you're in the Orthodox Church. Or there's a great 60 Minutes coverage that they did maybe 10 years ago. They spent years negotiating. Actually, should ask David Schneider about that. Maybe he has insights into that story as a former 60 Minutes guy. But so Kazantzakis and his friend, they walked from monastery to monastery. They climbed the mountain. They went way up to high where there are these caves, and they met these ascetics, these hermits who live in these caves, these sort of the ultimate form of being a monk, where you sit in the same place all day, way up high, and you think and you feel and you try to be close to God. And so he writes about it in his memoir, his last book called Report to Greco, which he wrote in the last year of his life. It's like a creative autobiography or memoir. And there's a whole chapter about this experience at the monasteries. It was 1914 when they went. So just a little after but plenty close enough. And the last bit with the almond tree is their last day. He says it's Christmas Eve in the creative memoir. That might, novelists love to embellish, you never know. But and they're coming back to the little town to get on the boat to head back towards Athens, and they see this almond orchard, and it's December, and there's one almond tree in bloom, which usually doesn't happen until later and closer to the springtime. And they're both struck by it, and Kazantzakis sees it first. He points it out to his friend Siklianos, and as Kazantzakis tells it in the memoir, they get on the boat and they're looking at the orchard getting smaller as they travel away. And Siklianos says he recites the poem. He composes it in his head. It's a hakai, which is a type of haiku. It's similar to a haiku, a Japanese 3-line verse form.
I said to the almond tree, "Sister, speak to me of God." And the almond tree blossomed.
The symmetry there that I love is that it's the 3-line form. So you start with the 3-line syllogism, and which is all about logic and deduction and rationale, and it's all here. And then you finish with this hakai, which is about a numinous postulation. So it's this wonderful yin and yang that the show lays out for us.
All men are mortal.
All men are mortal.
Socrates is a man, ergo Socrates is mortal.
I said to the almond tree, "Sister, speak to me of God." And the almond tree blossomed.
Wow.
That's beautiful. That's fantastic. And it's a wonderful thing too, how like Indy, you really see Indy like be captured by it's interesting when looking at Indy and his father as both being people who have this hunger for knowledge. They both have these people that just have very curious minds, but they're approaching it in two very different ways. Like one of them is much more analytical, much more like I will find answers in these books. And yet Indy is much more just like I learn through experience. And if the experience includes you know, talking with Kazantzakis and, you know, learning things much more in a tactile kind of way. It's very interesting dichotomy there, and it kind of goes back to, I guess, what we were talking about earlier with Anna, is how, like, I think the mom can really see, like, they're so much alike, and yet they themselves feel like they are complete polar opposites from each other, and they kind of need to be forced into the same room, start to get along. And what you see here in these final moments too is and throughout the whole show, but like how Henry is kind of softening up to his son as he comes to respect these elements of him, whereas Indy in the contrast is much more also respecting what his father, coming to terms with that, like he knows his father has knowledge. He knows that he's not just like completely a cold fish. He's actually has some really interesting stuff to say. Very cool.
It's like the truck chase and the car chase in Last Crusade. It's like it's almost a mirror of that, where, you know, these people are trying to kill us. I know, Dad. You know, it's and then you get Indy's the problem solver. He knows how to adapt and overcome, and Henry is just usually just completely out of. He's not an honest feet thinker, like you just said, Peter. But then you get to the very end, and Indy's out of bullets, and he's out of ways to pivot. And then here's Henry's moment, and he takes out his umbrella. You know, and it's a nice reminder of that complementary dynamic that you described.
I suddenly remembered my Charlemagne. Let my armies be the rocks and the trees and the birds in the sky.
That's wonderful. Although you did just make me remember, though, that nowhere in the Last Crusade is it established that Henry Jones has a fear of heights.
I could go way into the weeds and be annoying and you know and be nerdy and just point out that there's a deleted scene before they get in that plane that raises the tension, and so you could argue that they're so afraid and got to get out of here that they just get in the plane, and your adrenalines are going, and there's the fight with the Pat Roach character that was shot, and but didn't make the final cut of the movie. So the tension's really high. Quick, get in the plane. You know.
Have you seen it? Have you seen this deleted scene?
No. There is some photos. No. But you see the character in one shot when Indy sees the Nazi. I always forget that one character's name.
Yeah, no, I know you're talking about. He's next to the German colonel, and he's like kind of in a suit, and then he's running in. Yeah. It's a shame. I mean, for continuity, because, you know, it'd be cool to have a fight with Pat Roach. And
exactly.
That's weird. They've never released deleted scenes for those.
None of them.
All four of them, right? Like none of them.
Okay, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I this is in my archive of footage, if I ever need it. When they did a great featurette on the Blu-ray, I want to say it was called On the Set or something like that, and it's a loose edit of footage from the production, and within that there are some deleted scenes.
Hey,
it's me. Get out of here. Not like fully edited and with the worst sound, but you do see moments in that were deleted scenes.
One of these days we got to do a commentary
and a Patreon exclusive.
Yes, exactly.
The problem, Peter, nobody cares what you and I think of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Lucas does. I don't know why.
I care.
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you, Lucas, here's what I think of Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's great.
Where shall I find a new adversary so close to my own level?
There are worse reviews. That's wonderful. Yeah.
There are worse reviews. It's very true. All right. Well, back to the thing that people actually care about.
There's some irony in that. Go on.
The episode ends up with as Henry and Indy are descending down to the floor below, to the ground below from the Hanging Monastery.
I can see that, Indiana. Help me!
They get trapped in midair through a few plot contrivances, and they're stuck there for 24 hours, something like that. Like, it's a very long time just hanging there. It's a fun little moment, you know. It's a cool little. I love the way the cage looks too. Like it's in a way, like even if even if this wasn't conscious, like it is kind of this final moment of like they are trapped together in their own like prison.
Whose idea was it to light a fire?
Yours!
It was?
Yeah!
And it's fun to see them have to forge their way out of that.
It's like a mini Twilight Zone episode for a second there. Henry's going on about limbo, and Indy's saying maybe those people don't exist anymore. It's you know, it feels a little, it gets a little existential.
They've totally forgotten us. Maybe they never even existed.
Now let's not lose our heads. Come on.
Which is, but and it's outside the context is appropriate. I think you could do a whole podcast about Young Indy and the Twilight Zone. A lot of big comparisons there.
Henry just keeps talking about Willoughby for some reason. It's all this very strange. And then he tries to walk out of the cage. I get it. It's all connected.
Where is Willoughby?
Willoughby, sir? That's Willoughby right outside. Willoughby. July. Summer. It's 1888.
That's enough.
Well, in our interview, Matthew mentioned that it was Frank Darabont, or he believed it was Frank Darabont, who came up with this idea to end the episode of them turning the cage into the ladder.
And always the final act had to be a combination of the third act, which was where most of the lessons were taught as they were, and the fourth act would be the bit where you'd have to have the sort of Indiana Jones adventure. And it was very much Frank who said, well, we have to find what is the philosophy of Indiana Jones, really. I think it was him who came up in the story meetings with turn your cage into a ladder.
That they wanted a resolution to the action that paid off the philosophical themes of the episode. Was a Frank Darabont idea, which is funny because, you know, Darabont's credited, I assume, because he wrote the Russia episode, because that would make sense. But yet his idea sort of makes its way into the Greece episode, which is great. It's like they really did sort of all collaborate on.
Remind me of the logic there, Daniel. Like, is it like they're tying the wood and then?
Yeah. I just looked at the clip myself here, and they take the rope, they take slats of wood and bits of rope, and then they are tying. I don't know how they're keeping it from sliding. I suppose very tight knots.
Very tight ropes.
But they are tying the slats of wood to the rope and creating a rope ladder in theory. But then they have to pull the lower ones because they only have so many.
Yeah.
So they have to untie the lower ones, lift it up and tie. And again, though, I think the physics of it work, except for that. Yeah. How do you get the knots so tight that the ladder doesn't slide down the rope as you climb it? And by the way, a 10-year-old has to be able to untie that knot that you tied that was so strong.
Yeah.
It's Indiana Jones. From a stunt perspective, it does feel like something Indiana Jones could do. It's elaborate, but you want to believe that Indiana Jones could do this.
Absolutely. And then we get back up to the top. It's revealed that the person lowering them to the floor had gotten knocked on the head by something and presumably had a very rough concussion, should go to a hospital, but instead just gets up and is fine.
No, he died because there's no hospital up there, and even if he got up, like he just keeled over later from delayed reaction to his head injuries.
Yeah, it's very sad, but it's all happily ever after from there. And Henry and Indy share a really nice moment at the top of the ladder, having just survived perilous death. Now, in the original broadcast version, that's actually where the episode cuts, and it goes to Sean Patrick Flannery's Indy and Lloyd Owen and the dinner scene. Back to that.
When we finally escaped up the rope, I remember you picked me up, and you just held me really tight. It was the only time I can ever remember you actually hugged me. And it felt great. For a while there, just for that moment. You really were my dad.
Henry just kind of walks away, and then the scene where they leave. But in the DVD cuts that are now what everyone would be watching, and the versions that you watch on streaming as well, it then goes back to the hotel that they're at in Greece, and you reconnect with Anna and also Miss Seymour, and you learn that Miss Seymour's fine, even though she's still in a wheelchair for reasons unknown.
How was your weekend? Did you have a good time?
What would you say, Junior? Did we have a good time?
Philosophically speaking, Father?
Oh, philosophically speaking, son.
Well, I think I'd have to answer that with a syllogism.
A syllogism.
All fathers and sons have good times together.
We are father and son, ergo, we had a great time.
Well, I want to point something out because I was just pulling this up. And when you go to that last scene that you mentioned with Miss Seymour, I would say that Corey looks about the same as he does in the other connector segments. In other words, go to the beginning of the film and then the middle of the film. He's clearly a little older, not much older, but a little older than he is in the segments. But there's a scene between the hug you mentioned and the Miss Seymour reunion where they're in a cart and the father's like,
Junior,
Yes.
I don't know how much of this little adventure we should be telling your mother about.
All right, Father.
Jolly good.
Corey looks like he does in Tangiers. He actually looks much older in this one scene. So I can only assume that they did shoot. What's crazy about this, when you think about this, they shot the movie. It airs in 96. They would have had to have already shot the connectors that we have now, right? Knowing they were going to re-edit it, because why else would you shoot connectors, right? But now we're going to air the other version. And then maybe George is like, I'm watching this. We need another scene. This is too abrupt. We're jumping from the monastery to the hotel. Rick, I want you to put him on a cart and just get me this one line.
And it works, Daniel. It's brilliant.
You know, arguably, yeah, you need that moment because the following scene, if they had already shot it, there's this whole humor of them being like, you know, we're not going to tell you. And he is probably like, why aren't, like, it's like, goes, well, why aren't they? You know, like, but I will say seeing Corey, like, he's wearing the same costume, but he's age jumping, like, three different periods in the space of a minute, you know?
Yeah. It must have been such a headache for the costume designers to be either to, I mean, I can't imagine they just kept everything, but maybe they did. I don't know. And then,
no, we know they didn't because remember in Daredevil's costume's different.
That's right.
So like I mean, maybe not every but certainly they didn't keep every costume.
Yeah. Wow. You know? The undertaking to get a moment.
Even the shot when they arrive at the hotel is almost certainly a composite. The exterior, it's the cart,
yes,
and then getting out. So everything was just Frankenbited, you know, together.
Only in the George Lucas production.
Well, look, this is one of the earliest, as we've always talked about, right? One of the earliest projects to use this sort of technology and this sort of technique, and for him to be able to say, "I want to create a scene." Where they're arriving at the hotel, go get a cart from one of the other things we shot, you know, and get a matte painting or a static shot of this hotel. I mean, I mentioned the map sequence earlier in the podcast. Almost every shot you see in that sequence, other than the shots of the actors, you could identify from other episodes. So, you know, there's footage of the mosque. I don't know the name, the one in Istanbul. You know, all these places that we've seen in the series, and they cut them in, and it's like, yeah, this is just footage that they have. It's ready to be used. So it's crazy what they did. 22 installment film. There's the one shot that gets used 3 or 4 times of Junior, come up here. They're on the boat. It's from behind, and he's pointing, and it's Marseille, and it's Alexandria, and it's Athens, and yeah. Yeah, right. Well, the boats and the trains, Peter he speculates that there's one train. They had a train, and they just used it for everything. You know, it doesn't matter what year it is. It doesn't matter who's in the train. It's like, oh, we got the train set. Bring them into the compartment.
And you first keep me onto that, how that shot with Joss Ackland is reused in multiple episodes as well.
At least in Attack of the Hawkmen, which I always joke. It's like, why is he here? Why is the Austrian spy master?
So we made it to the end of the episode here. Lucas, we've covered so much ground, but is there anything else that you would wanted to mention or any talking points that we haven't covered yet?
Well, there's always more to talk about with this wonderful show. I mean, one of the things that I'd say, if I could say two things, if I may, I don't mean to suck up more airtime.
Please.
Been so kind, but going back to Kazantzakis for a moment, that relationship between wisdom and logic, wisdom is greater than logic, that sort of breakthrough that he leads Indy to, that Henry Sr. appropriately disagrees with when he's reading the draft. To me, it's one of those great instances that kind of takes you into the fractal network of George Lucas storytelling. There's a wonderful line in the Star Wars saga, in Attack of the Clones, when Obi-Wan goes to meet Dexter Jettster, and they're talking about the dart. He's trying to identify the dart, and Dexter Jettster is impatient with the analysis droids of the Jedi Archives. They only focus on symbols, and then he says,
I should think that you Jedi would have more respect for the difference between knowledge and wisdom.
And it's just this beautiful line. It's George, showing his philosophy a little bit, maybe. And Jonathan Hale's working on that script, a proud young indie writer. So I love those connections where you find also the unmoved mover could, be a force of some kind. I'll leave that there. But the last point I just wanted to point out, I found another great Kazantzakis quote in his memoir where he says, "Whenever a figure chanced to combine heroism with sanctity, then at last I possessed a model human being." And I read that and I went, that's Indiana Jones.
The healing power of the Grail is the only thing that can save your father now. It's time to ask yourself what you believe.
That idea of heroism and sanctity, that sort of holiness, that selflessness and giving quality. And that's Indy's journey that he takes his whole life. And we as viewers are really, really lucky to watch that for a huge swath of it. But these stories with Corey Carrier are essential. It's where he gets all the ingredients. And I think the story of Indy is he gets all these amazing ingredients that most of us don't get. And that directive away because we don't get to go on world tours. And then he spends the whole middle of his life trying to ignore those ingredients.
Are you trying to develop a sense of humor or light like death?
Being tempted by lots of other things. And then he learns to come back to it through love and compassion and selflessness.
Somewhere your grandpa is laughing.
This story is just so powerful and essential in Indy's arc, and it only gets deeper as we go to Benares and off to China and the next two stories. So,
Indy. Oh, hey, Kate. What are you doing? I'm meditating. It's pretty hard. I got all the thoughts out of my head once, but then I started thinking about apple pie.
We talk a lot about Indy's superpower, and some of it is the languages, but it is also his education. The character has this education that, yes, very few people would be as privileged to travel the world and learn all these things as a child. But it's nice to imagine that if one could, that one would be affected in this way. And, we talked about the series, but, when you get to the films, there's obviously a lot of elements of belief and religious significance in the films. And the character of Indiana Jones, while certainly a skeptic, in a lot of ways, always seems to treat these things with a certain level of respect.
Inside the Ark are treasures beyond your wildest aspirations. You want to see it open as well as I.
You betrayed Shiva.
Ask yourself, why do you seek the cup of Christ? Is it for his glory or for yours?
I didn't come for the cup of Christ. I came to find my father.
Nazca Indians used to bind their infants' heads with rope, elongate the skull like that.
Why?
Honor the gods.
No, God's head is not like that, man.
Depends on who your god is.
If only sometimes the respect of the academic, but respect. And it seems that he's learned that respect from traveling and seeing the way people live and the different ways that they live and the different beliefs that they hold.
I love this stuff. You guys just make me so happy to get to talk about this. But it's don't look in the Ark, Marion.
Marion, don't look at it. Shut your eyes, Marion. Don't look at it no matter what happens.
It's the difference between Belloc and Indy. Indy is Belloc without all these experiences that he has and travels with father and everything else. And so he knows not to look in that Ark.
It'll take only a nudge to make you like me, to push you out of the light.
Yeah, and I was going to say too, it's like I think it is it's also the respect of the people that are believing these things. You know, it never seems to me that Indy himself would describe himself as a Christian necessarily, or like views one religion as more significant than another. You know, he is always viewing them as equal things, and it's about the way that people react to them that he finds incredibly interesting and informative. So like he can view whether it's, you know, the crystal skulls or the temple, the stuff in the Temple of Doom, or
the Sankara stones, Peter.
Magic rocks. My grandpa was a magician. He spent his entire life with a rabbit in his pocket and pigeons up his sleeves. He made a lot of children happy and died a very poor man. Magic rocks. Sweet dreams, Dr. Jones.
It's an Indiana Jones podcast. We have to know what these things are.
Excuse me. You know, or the Judeo-Christian elements in The Last Crusade and Raiders. It's like he views them all equally. Like these are not things that he views in terms of a hierarchy of significance. And I think that's always an important element of it too, which is that, you know, he's, again, I mean, I think what the show is really honing in on is the value of the individual. And I think the movies also hone that in, is that like he values the individual, and the people he's often up against are those people who don't do that. Whether it's the Nazis or Belloc or whomever. It's like these are people who view people as commodities, and Indy is there having to view them as individuals.
Well, and I love something too about the way the franchise, and perhaps this is Lucas's aspiration. It synthesizes all of human history, but also human experience and belief. In other words, you know, part of the human experience and the human history is these religions, is the beliefs about these different things and different places and times that these people have. And so he writes these stories as, you know, Indiana Jones living in this time of the 20th century. I mean, I think people who lived in the 20th century saw themselves as the climax of human history, whether that was right or not, Mr. Francis Fukuyama.
Some people think the future means the end of history. Well, we haven't run out of history quite yet.
But it's what they thought.
In some ways, it's too heady a moment. There are too many expectations there. This notion that everything is going to be great now, everything's going to be so totally different. It's wonderful, but it doesn't last.
And so I think the character walks in that as well. And you know, the conceit that one might discover the Ark of the Covenant in 1936 or the Holy Grail in 1938 or the Sankara Stones in 1935 as the conclusion of this, you know, epic narrative. It gives these stories some scope.
We're about to complete a great quest that began almost 2,000 years ago.
Jones, do you realize what the Ark is? It's a transmitter. It's a radio for speaking to God. And it's within my reach.
And then I think what he does in Young Indy is he takes that idea a little bit further, because instead of it just being a particular artifact or particular religion or a particular narrative, he is now trying to sort of put this cap on the human history, on the human experience, right? And that, you know, we are walking through history, right? Like in Raiders of the Lost Ark. We're passing through it, you know? And I think that's just really special. And I certainly a rare and unique thing for an artist to be doing. And I hope it's not the last time. And I hope someone else can come along and do something similar.
If I may follow that for a moment, I just want to say, you know, over the decades, Star Wars has gotten more respect or acknowledgement for its mythical qualities, its universality, its depth beneath the spaceships and laser swords, but Indy hasn't gotten the same hasn't developed the same kind of reputation in the same way. In some respects it has, but it's much more seen as popcorn fare. But as you both just eloquently stated, it is very much another example of George Lucas applying his curiosity and his intellectual passion to things. And the way that the Clone Wars is sort of George's author's commentary on those 6 Star Wars movies.
Any hope that the Jedi can prevail? Is there?
There is always hope, my friend.
though it often comes in forms not looked for. The key is knowing how to see it and seizing that opportunity.
Traveled far, I have. Looking for those who can teach me.
The question is, are you worthy of being taught?
Young Indy is his author's commentary on those 4 movies that he worked on. And so it's just so wonderful that you guys see that. Thank you.
Oh, hey, thank you, Lucas. I mean, this has been a wonderful conversation. I think we've been talking here for nearly 2 hours, so it's absolutely fantastic. And just, thank you again for coming on here. You brought such a wealth of knowledge like that. It really just brought so much to this episode, and I just appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor, and thanks to all the listeners. I'm one of them, and I look forward to all the other episodes this season.
Do you have any thing coming up that you want to promote, or any social media stuff you want to throw out there for the listeners if they want to learn more about you?
Thanks for asking. I'm not on social media. I'm got my nose too buried in books, I guess, and things. But I don't have anything specific. All I can say is there's a lot of great nonfiction that comes out of Lucasfilm as well. Whether those are those wonderful documentaries that David Schneider and the Jack documentary team made that we're releasing on YouTube every 2 weeks right now, and there are 94, and we have about 20 or so out. So the next one I'll be clicking publish on tomorrow morning, but also Lucasfilm.com, StarWars.com, ILM.com, SkySound.com. The books by people like Phil Shostak and Kristen Baver. There are wonderful, wonderful things that you can read by a lot of really talented writers who both work at Lucasfilm and who are contributors to Lucasfilm. So please, keep an eye on all those websites and share things that you like, because we love to know that people enjoy what we write.
Let's put a fine point on that, too. He mentioned the documentaries. Of course, we did that episode with David Snyder last season, which I loved doing and really opened my eyes.
A lot of historical documentaries, a lot of historical work tends to rob the history of its drama because we know how things turned out. And it has that kind of feeling in it when the story is unfolding. The drama's gone. I wanted to deal with the moment. I wanted the audience to be in that unfolding moment when real lives were faced with real decisions, that fork in the road.
And we talked about those documentaries, the true history documentaries that featured historic footage that previously were only available on the Young Indy DVDs, which of course are now very hard to get your hands on if you don't already have them. Lucasfilm has been, as we record this, I guess over the last several months, been releasing these documentaries on YouTube, as he mentioned, one at a time, and they've been kind of doing it. I won't speculate as to your methodology, but it feels like you've been very topical. They're not being released in like the order of the DVD, but perhaps with some other design at work, perhaps your design. But it's really enjoyable, and head over to the Lucasfilm YouTube channel to watch those, share them, please, comment, rate them, give them the likes, so that people like Lucas and everyone else working over there get a sense that people appreciate these. And you can use them in classrooms. They're free to watch, being on YouTube. And so we really encourage everyone to go check those out.
Thank you. And I'll add on there that you can go to lucasfilm.com/young-indy-education to learn more there as well. And you can email us at our email alias education@lucasfilm.com. If you have feedback or questions about what we're doing, you'll be added to our outreach list. We are going out to educators and students as much as we can, but these aren't solely for the classroom. They're for curious people everywhere. And as David can explain much better than I can, it's just really good storytelling in these films. Thank you for allowing us to spread the word here.
It's wonderful. And again, we talk about this in David Snyder interview, but the documentaries were such a labor of love for George especially. And in many ways, it's George's last statement on Young Indiana Jones. So if you want to show your support for Young Indy, or just, they're just great resources. They're so fascinating. They're not super long. They're about 30 minutes each. Some are less. So give them a watch, because you're going to learn something that very likely you haven't heard about. So it's a fascinating documentary series. Definitely worth checking out.
Lucas, you mentioned you had a poem you wanted to read.
in my research, digging around in books and stuff, learning about Nikos Kazantzakis and the Meteora monasteries and Aristotle, I came across the Greek poet George Seferis, who is about a generation after Kazantzakis and his friend who he went to the monasteries with. He died in 1971, the year Lucasfilm was established, coincidentally. And it came up, I found this little poem of his called Just a Little More, and I thought it might be a sweet way to wrap things up here, because as you might catch, it has some similar imagery and a little bit of similar thematics to what we've been talking about.
Is it long?
And yes, Indy, it's short. Here's Just a Little More by George Seferis. Just a little more, and we shall see the almond trees in blossom, the marble shining in the sun, the sea, the curling waves. Just a little more, let us rise just a little higher.
That's wonderful. Well, let's wrap things up right there then. So if you want to get in touch with us, you can find us at Young Indy Pod on Instagram. Please rate us 5 stars on whichever podcast provider you like. It really helps to keep us going and reaches out to new listeners so that they can find our podcast as well. So until next time, for Daniel and myself, thanks for being here, and keep on adventuring.
Next time on the Young Indy Chroniclers.
We're thrilled to have second unit director on Empire Strikes Back, directed the Young Indiana Jones TV movie Phantom Train of Doom, Peter MacDonald.
I really enjoyed the stuff in Norway because it was really exciting.
By the end of the decade, you're directing Rambo 3.
You're given this bloody great train, the big action sequences, the star of the film wanted all his own stuff, so he's running over the top of the carriages of the train, and I think if he just slips once, I got to phone him up and say, oh, by the way, do you have anyone else in mind?
Next time on the Young Indy Chroniclers.
We're thrilled to have
Madeline Most. Madeline has worked as a writer, filmmaker, photographer, journalist, critic, cinematographer, and painter. Her early film credits include Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back. She also happens to be Peter's wife.
He said, I love Dick Lester. He's a really sweet guy. But if he directed Superman, he never would have gotten out of the phone booth. I watched this last night and I was like screaming with, I can't believe you didn't get awards. Normally in LA, you'd have straps. They did that on the train. They did that for real.